I'm going to address the Google controversy, and I know what you're thinking. Just what the internet needs, another hot take on the Google memo. Well, I have to admit, when the story first broke, I started to write an incendiary piece about how Silicon Valley is becoming a safe space, Oberlin-esque trigger warning culture. But then I lost heart. Not because I think that Google did the right thing. I've just grown weary of the culture war rhetoric. So I'm going to try a new approach. That's coming up next on The Factual Feminist. First, a few facts. At Google, men hold 80% of the tech jobs and about 75% of leadership positions. But this disparity isn't unique to Google. At U.S. colleges, last year, men earned 82% of computer science degrees and 80% of engineering degrees. Why are there so few women? Well, in his now notorious Memo, James Damore tried to answer that question. And for doing so, he was fired by Google for advancing harmful gender stereotypes. Let me explain why the memo caused so much anger and grief. Clearly, it struck a nerve because of its claims of innate biological sex differences. As a rule, anybody who takes up this topic has to proceed with care. There are so many ways to go wrong. And even if you do it responsibly, you're likely to upset a lot of people. Now, is that because those people are anti-science? Not necessarily. As a professor of philosophy of 20 years, I am well aware of the long history of bogus claims about women's essential nature. Immanuel Kant deemed women ethically inferior, and according to Friedrich Nietzsche, quote, "When a woman has scholarly inclinations, there is generally something wrong with her sexual nature." History is littered with reckless and damaging pronouncements about women's nature. So I get the skepticism. Now, in fairness to Damore, his claims were categorically different from those of Kant and Nietzsche. Damore discussed population-level differences in the distribution of personality traits and interests. He said that women on average have higher interest in people and men in things. He dutifully noted that population averages tell you nothing about individuals. But his memo was a little awkwardly worded and easily misunderstood. The Factual Feminist would have left out references to women's greater tendency for neuroticism and high anxiety, for example. Well, of the hundreds of blogs and op-eds on the Google controversy, the one that I liked most is by Alice Eagly. She's a professor of social psychology at Northwestern who has been doing research on the psychology of sex and gender for nearly 50 years. I agree, she says, that biological differences between the sexes likely are part of the reason we see fewer women than men in the ranks of Silicon Valley's tech workers. She points out that men tend to score higher on spatial reasoning tests, and she explains that this may give them an edge in computer science. Furthermore, she points to a large body of research showing that, in general, women are more interested in people compared with men who are more interested in things. To the extent that tech occupations are concerned more with things than people, men would, on average, be more attracted to them. But she warns pundits on both sides of the nature-nurture debate against rushing to conclusions. The precise connections between biology and life choices are murky and not well understood. And even if biology is partly responsible for the gender gap in tech, that does not rule out other explanations. It can simultaneously be true that there are natural differences between men and women that explain the gender gap, and that Silicon Valley is a difficult place for women. Take Chloe Condon, a 5'2" female software engineer who recently wrote a funny piece about what it's like to be a woman in tech. "I don't look like the classic stereotype. Mistakes happen," she says. At conferences, people assume that she's somebody's daughter who tagged along, or just a booth attendant who drifted in for a glass of wine. The Factual Feminist herself served as president of the Slide Rule Club in junior high school, so I know what she's talking about. I also think that Chloe Condon has the right instincts on how to address the too few women in tech problem. Quote, "It's important to approach the issue with passion and enthusiasm, but also with a sense of humor and forgiveness." In return, she promises not to assume a guy is an engineer just because of his plaid shirt and Patagonia jacket. Now, I promise no culture war rhetoric, but I can't help but say this. The proper response to Damore's memo is not for Google to double down on implicit bias or microaggression training. Listen to sane scholars like Alice Eagly and bring in people like Chloe Condon. To quell the battle of the sexes, the goal should be a friendly atmosphere where people can speak freely and even joke around with one another. By firing James Damore, Google has made that goal even harder to achieve. Well, let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the series, follow me on Twitter and Facebook, and thank you for watching The Factual Feminist.